Good afternoon, fellas. Happy Monday to you. I hope you're doing well. Another gorgeous day out there and another great weekend in the books. Recording this for all of you who were not able to make it on Saturday. For those of you who were there but were so exhausted you need a refresher to remind yourself about what we talked about. Last week we looked at 2 Samuel chapter 15. Absalom, who was one of David's children, uh, decided to try and stage a revolt and do a coup, and was so distressed and frustrated and disappointed with his father David's leadership that he decided to try and take matters into his own hands. We saw, looking briefly at 13 and 14, that this was grounded in David's other son Amnon, who ended up raping his daughter Tamar. And Absalom was Tamar's brother, and he took great offense at this, and great offense at David's lack of justice and lack of consequence towards Amnon. So Absalom killed Amnon, fled, was eventually brought back by Joab. But when he was brought back, he was still found that he was not in the good graces of his father, the king. And so in light of that and in reaction to that, Absalom started playing politic. He started greeting people at the gates. He started glad handing, shaking hands, kissing babies, making promises, and essentially telling everyone that would listen, if only I were in charge, then things would get better. And it reached a point where Absalom asked David's blessing to go and worship the Lord at Hebron. And when Absalom went to Hebron, he didn't worship the Lord. Instead, he gave the cry for revolt, and he had himself named king over the land. Interestingly, when David hears about this, his response was not one of retaliation. His response was not one of smiting his son. And there was some discussion at the tables about whether or not this is another rehashing of a theme that we've seen so often in these books about fathers who are unwilling or reticent to discipline their children. But we took a look specifically at verse 25 and 26, where David, as he's leaving Jerusalem and he's fleeing to the hills, tells Zadok the priest to send the ark back into Jerusalem, to actually let God rest in God's resting place, the city which he called his own. And David says, if I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him. So here we see that David is making a clear statement that he recognizes that his role is a small part and a bit role in God's kingdom formation. And he hopes sincerely that God will let him back in to continue playing the part as king. But here, really, almost the same prayer that Jesus offers in Gethsemane: "Thy will be done, Thy kingdom come." Right? That David is basically saying, if by my rejection God's kingdom can be better served, then so be it. But if by reconciling me back to the throne, God can be honored, then that would be his preference. And pretty amazing to see that that David was willing to have his rebellious son take the throne, and he was willing to walk the road of humility and shame out of Jerusalem, up the Mount of Olives. Pretty amazing to consider the close parallels between David leaving Jerusalem and heading towards the Garden of Gethsemane, the inversion of Jesus, who was willing to have rebellious sons take his throne as he walked from the Gethsemane into Jerusalem to die upon the tree. And we're going to look this coming week at chapter 18, Absalom's death, as he is killed hanging from a tree. And again, a number of parallels there. But pretty incredible to see that David here, as the king, really in a lot of ways mirroring or imaging or providing a powerful and evocative analogy of God himself, as rebellious children are interested in usurping his power And just like Christ, and just like the sermon we heard this past Sunday on Philippians 2, that Jesus, taking on the very form of a servant, humbled himself even to the point of death, and death on a cross. And here we see David imaging both of those things. So powerful, challenging. This was nuanced and complex, not very easy, not very black and white. But it's one of those things where we find ourselves invited to trust God in similar ways, to trust God in the midst of our challenges, in the midst of the loss and the fear and the sadness, but also to trust God by serving humbly and not grasping for that which we see to be ours by right, but instead submitting to those, even our enemies, when they would grasp. So tough stuff, but a great conversation for those who were there. I do hope that you'll be able to come this coming Saturday, chapter 18. Only 3 Saturdays left before we close out for the year. It's been incredible, and would love for us to end well as we put a bow on 1st and 2nd Samuel. So reach out to me if you have any questions, you want to talk. Hope you're doing well, and we'll see you on Saturday, if not before. God bless.